All right, well, as you can see, the driver's side is done and all back together. And like I mentioned at the end of the previous video, I ran it for a while and, didn't see any leaks or anything like that. So that's completed. Next up, I'm going to start on the passenger side. It's going to be pretty similar to the driver's side. The first thing I'm going to do is try to remove as much of this as I can to kind of gain a little bit more access to the valve cover itself. I'm going to try and remove the valve cover without lifting the engine. I know a lot of guys just lift the engine, an inch or two to just gain enough access. From what I can tell, it looks like there's just enough room on the passenger side as there was on the driver's side. So I'm going to try to do that first. If it ends up being too difficult, I'll just unbolt the engine and jack it up a little bit. But so yeah, that's the plan. And yeah, so first step is I'm going to disconnect the battery and just start removing some of the stuff here. Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to do, I need to kind of remove the intake, disconnect the MAF, disconnect a couple of coolant lines. I believe I need to unbolt the power steering lines and kind of move those to the side. And I got to move some of the power steering components up here, but yeah, I'm going to start with the, well, first thing I'll do is I'll disconnect the battery, but then I'm going to move over to the intake and some of the coolant lines and see how much room that gives me. All right, so I've moved the air box and I've got that out of the way. Got the MAF plug kind of tucked away back here. Just have a bungee cord lightly kind of holding the coolant and the throttle cable lines there. It actually looks like there's a lot more room on this side to pull this valve cover off. I'm kind of wondering if I can just get away with, I might be able to just pull it off now. It doesn't look like there's really going to be anything else in the way. Obviously I'll need to remove some of the wiring here, and there's something down here I'll need to disconnect. Otherwise, this side looks like there's a lot more room. I thought I was going to have to pull this reservoir off, but it looks like that could probably stay there. As you can see, this side was way worse, and it was dripping right on to the exhaust down there, so it was really starting to smoke pretty bad. There really wasn't anything back here, but it was dripping down there somewhere. Yeah, this side, it also looks like the majority of it was, well, it looks like it was coming from maybe the seal up top here on that oil separator, but in any case, it's all going to come off. It's all going to get replaced and get it all fixed up. But the intake was really easy to get off. The hardest part is just accessing the bolts themselves. But there's just the two bolts down here along next to the engine. There's a rubber grommet here. You want to make sure you don't lose. And this just pulls out of the fender area. But I'm going to need to clean that before I reinstall it. But yeah, so I think next I'm gonna disconnect the wiring for the ignition coils, pull those out, and then yeah, I might start removing the hardware for the valve cover. Oh, that's a lot better. You can never have enough light. I'm still using one of the lights from the LED shop light kit that I bought. Got the 6-pack kit over here, and I bought an 8-pack kit for up here since this is where I usually working on the car, so I wanted it to be a little bit brighter, but just got this one rigged up for now since I don't have one of those working lights. But yeah, well, it's a lot easier to see. So all right, back to work. Okay, I've got the ignition coils out. The one on the right came out with no problem. The one on the left sits like this. Regardless, no matter which way I was kind of tilting it, it wouldn't come out, and I started to wonder if I was going to need to jack up the engine a little bit just to give me enough clearance to pull it out. But I ended up figuring out that if I just flipped it completely upside down, if I just spun it 180 degrees, it gave me just enough clearance to pull it out up and over the you know, this kind of frame area here. So far so good. We'll see how easily I can get some of the lower valve cover bolts out. But it looks good so far, except that lower left one looks like it might be an issue, but I don't know. There's only one way to find out, so. Alright, so I just about have all the bolts out. That bottom left one was kind of a pain in the ass, but there's just enough room to pull that out. The last one I have left is just that middle lower one. Of course, I forgot to put the oil pan underneath when I pulled out one of the lower bolts, so had to deal with that again. I also put down a rag to catch any of the extra oil that may come out when I pull the valve cover off. The manifold is down there, so the last thing I want to do is have to deal with burning oil for a little bit. But yeah, so before I pull the valve cover off, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this and get this out of the way, and I'm gonna pull the valve cover off. All right, the valve cover's off. I was trying to figure out if this is the first time it's been pulled off. It looks like it. Looks like I was the first one to remove it. Which is kind of surprising. Anyway, so yeah, it can be removed without lifting the engine, but it is kind of a pain in the ass. And you have to be really careful when removing it, because there's, at least on my engine, there was a ton of dirt and debris up on top. So I try to be super careful to not knock a bunch of that, you know, into the valve train, because that would be terrible. But anyway, everything looks pretty good on the engine. So I'm just gonna get to work cleaning the valve cover itself, and then I'll go ahead and replace the gaskets and get everything back in. One mistake I did is I should have removed this first, you know, without thinking about it. I waited till I had unbolted the valve cover, and it's kind of a pain in the ass to get this off. So yeah, I mean, at least maybe leave, like, you know, the top middle bolt torqued down, you know, when you pop this off. But okay, well, I went ahead and kind of cleaned up the surfaces for the gasket with some brake cleaner, just kind of on a little cloth, and made sure that there wasn't any debris that got in there, but everything looks okay. I went ahead and I cleaned the channels where the gasket sits. I just used a rag and, you know, one of these picks on the end of a rag, and just kind of went through the channels to get all the debris that I could, get it as cleaned out as I could, you know, and get it ready for the the new gasket. And again, I'll have the part numbers for everything, the gaskets that I used for these. I'll have those in the description. But this is the valve cover gasket for this side. These are the spark plug gaskets that go over here. I am going to be reusing the half moon gaskets, so I'm going to leave those in place. I didn't see any evidence that they were leaking, so I'm just going to leave them in there and I guess hope for the best. Otherwise I'll be redoing this job in the near future. But in any case, yeah, I'm going to get this prepped and get the valve cover back on. All right, the valve cover's back on. Wasn't too difficult to get back on. Just got to kind of keep it up against the frame as you slide the valve cover on to make sure it doesn't make contact with anything. But once you get it down there, it slips on pretty easily. And so tighten it down the same sequence as I used on the driver's side. But basically done. Gonna get the gasket on here, reconnect this, just kind of put everything back together. The ignition coils, spark plugs, get the wires and everything all buttoned up. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. Okay, I have everything back together. One thing you want to remember, which I almost forgot, is you want to connect this bracket to the bolt of the ignition coil, before you start putting everything else together. And I had it kind of tucked away and noticed it at the last second. And the trick to get the left ignition coil in is when you insert it, you'll want to have it upside down. And then once you get it in there, you can flip it around and bolt it on. Yeah, and the plugs, the white faces the front of the engine, the black faces the rear, and just want to make sure that those are tight before you install the airbox and get everything else in front of it. So yeah, and this is all buttoned up. Everything looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to get this stuff on, the airbox, the intake elbow and all that. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much done. All right, everything's put back together. Yeah, really wasn't much to it to get everything back together. If you're like me, you kind of took the time to clean underneath the airbox, even though you'll probably never see it. But yeah, just took the time to kind of wipe everything down and kind of clean it up. Yeah, so now it's all back together. I'm just gonna start it, let it run for a while, and just make sure that there are no leaks that develop. But yeah, that's pretty much it.